Hello friends, I'm Rosa. Welcome to the channel. So today we are talking about 10 books that I have read that are supposed to be like the best books that I've read according to Goodreads at least. Do I agree with all of them? No, not necessarily, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So how we're gonna go about this is that I've taken just 10 books. I was tempted to take 12 books, but then I realized that 2 of the books would be by the same author, so I decided to just settle on 10. And I've also bypassed certain books that I don't talk about on the channel, but also I have not included sequels in this because then pretty much all of them would end up, or at least like half of them would end up being Sarah J Maas. Plus, sequels also tend to have a higher rating than the first books in series. Like that is definitely a trend that I see on Goodreads, so we're just gonna bypass sequels, ignore them, and only include first books in series. So I got 10 books. They're a little bit of a mix of this and that. There's some contemporary, a lot of it is fantasy, some of it is young adult, some of it is adult. So we have a nice mix. I will make sure to link to all of the books in the description box, by the way, if you want to check them out. So there'll be a link to both Amazon, but also Book Depository. So I got my tea. I hope you got yourself a snack or a cup of tea or coffee if you drink that. Because knowing me, we're probably going to sit here for a while because I tend to not be able to stop talking. So let's get started talking about the right things, the books. Yes. Book 10 is upside down. Book 10. The first book that we're talking about is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff, which came out last year, and it's currently sitting at a 4.41 on Goodreads, which is pretty high. I would say anything above a 4.2, I am impressed. There's not a lot of books above 4.2, I think. So 4.4 is pretty dang impressive, and it only goes higher after this one, because this is the least good book out of the 10 books. I don't want to say the worst because it's not a bad book. This is adult fantasy with vampires, as you can probably tell from the title. Also, I would say horror vibes now and then. But in this book we follow Gabriel de Leon, who is technically, can I say that? He's a vampire hunter. Vampire hunters in this are very much tied to religion in a way. And they're also tied to these 4 different vampire houses that are in this world. So all vampires come from these 4 different houses. And that means depending on what house you're connected to, you have certain powers. Vampires in this book, by the way, are evil. Like, they are proper evil, which is really nice to see because I've read a lot of books where they're not. So it was really cool to see like horrific, terrible vampires for a change. But we follow Gabriel, and he is, like I said, a vampire hunter. He's supposed to be like the most famous, or not necessarily famous, maybe that's the wrong word, but he's like well known among the vampires for being very good at killing vampires. But he's been taken prisoner by the vampires, actually. So by the Forever King, I think his title is in the book. And while he's at the prison, or while he's imprisoned by the vampires, he's telling his story, because this is actually told in 2 different timelines. So we have the timeline where he is growing up, learning about his powers and how he was found by the hunters, the other hunters. I think they're called something else. This is actually really annoying me. Silver Saints, is that what they're called? Silver Saints. Yes. Oh, he's also the last remaining one in the now, so. But we learn about him, how he grows up, becomes a Silver Saint as he trains as well, and then we also follow him as he is on the hunt for the Holy Grail, which is the last thing that humanity needs to survive, because there's this like night that's like fallen on the world, so it's always, basically always almost night. Like the sun never really comes up, which is obviously bad for us humans, but really good for the vampires. So he's on the hunt for the Holy Cup. I want to call it Holy Grail. Anyway, same thing. So he can lift this kind of curse from the world and free us humans, but he's also imprisoned, so you know. I feel like I have talked about this book, talked about the synopsis before, and done a lot better job at it, but that's the gist of it, so let's go with it. This was a really cool book. I see why a lot of people like it, but I also think that J. Kristoff has a sort of, not necessarily like a cult following, but he has a lot of fans. He also has a very distinctive style, at least as far as I have gathered, because I have read this, but also the Aurora cycle, which is YA, so it's a lot cleaner, I would say, compared to this, but I feel like this is a little bit more leaning on his style. It's very gritty, bloody, language-wise, there's a lot of swearing. So like, I think this leans more towards stuff like his own style, because he wrote the Aurora cycle with Amy Kaufman. But I think he definitely has like a fan base that is very dedicated, and and that might be one of the reasons why the rating is so high. That said, I did give this 5 stars because I loved it. As one who's not in a like, I'm not a part of his like fan following. I just picked it up because I thought the premise of it sounded cool. It was also included in an Illumicrate box. Actually, my very first Illumicrate box, monthly box at least. So I was just really curious about it, intrigued, and picked it up, and I loved it to bits. I thought it was perfect. It had a nice balance between like all these terrible things that are happening, a lot of action, but there's also more heartfelt and sad stuff in it as well. There's a little bit of everything. A lot of things that could make a lot of people uncomfortable though, so definitely check up on that. But overall, I had a really good time with this. I remember picking this up and bringing it with me to Copenhagen, which I will never do again with a book that is 750 pages because it was heavy, so that's not happening again. But this was lovely. 5 stars for me, so I am on board with the rating. Oh, one particular thing that I liked was the like timeline back and forth, but not just like a timeline back and forth, like him actually sitting in the now and then telling his story in 2 different timelines and like going back and forth between them, because he is basically not being interviewed by someone, but he's having a conversation with someone, and you'll see like comments now and then during his telling his story where he's like, just, just stay quiet. I'm getting to the point, to this vampire he's talking to at the moment. So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was fun as well. Jeez, my hand. We only just started. My hand hurts from holding that. Okay. Next book we have is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and this is a young adult contemporary fantasy. It's set at school in our time, and it's also a King Arthur retelling, or at least like draws elements from the King Arthur story. So we follow Bree, who is at the school. It's been a month or a couple of months after her mother has died, and Bree is dealing with a lot of sadness, a lot of sorrow after losing her mom. Her mom died in a car accident, and there was something suspicious about not necessarily the accident, but something afterwards when she was talking with the police. And Bree has been thinking about this since then. Something seemed off. But she's at the school now where I believe her mother also used to go. She's trying to fall in with all the other students and stuff, but she's just dealing with the loss of her mother and just grieving over it. So one night, her and her friend decide to go out, try to be like the other students and have some fun. But something happens at this get-together that they end up going to, and Bree sees some things that she's not supposed to see. There are some creatures in the air, some attacks are happening, and Bree is very confused, and like I said, most definitely not supposed to see this, because she also sees a couple of people who are chasing these things, and then they notice that Bree can see them, and she's just not supposed to. So one thing leads to another. Bree finds herself in the middle of this sort of secret society that is somehow tied to King Arthur, and she's convinced that this society has something to do with her mother's death. And so she wants to infiltrate the society, learn about their secrets, learn about what happened with her mother and the whole situation that was going on there. And I don't know how to fit this into the synopsis or into my resume, but she also has powers that she didn't know she had. She just kind of learns about it. But and we'll get to that. It's just really hard for me to mention like without giving away too much about the rest of the story, because you don't actually know she has powers unless you've read the synopsis, which at this point I hope you have, so I didn't spoil anything. But it says in the synopsis that she has powers, but you don't actually learn about it until halfway through the book. So that's why it's a little bit difficult to kind of fit into my resume. That said, about Legendborn, I went into this thinking that I was gonna love this because, well, partially because it has such a high rating, but also because a lot of people, just looking at reviews and such, they were raving over it. Like, it seemed like a lot of people think this is really amazing. It's currently sitting at a 4.41, so about the same as Empire the Vampire. My issue with this is that there are some tropes in it that I just don't like. And on top of that, it was slow. I feel like when you put something in the synopsis, usually you've kind of covered the synopsis about 20% into the book, but like I mentioned, she only learns about her powers about halfway through the book. So like the synopsis part took half the book to get through. Like it took half a book to cover the synopsis, which is it's not because there's like so much in the synopsis. I feel like maybe I'm just more used to the more fast-paced YA, the like 300-page books that you just kind of like, you just go through them so quickly, you devour them so quickly, whereas this is closing in on 500 pages and therefore it takes its time a little bit more. But on top of that, there's also parts of it that are so info dumpy to me that started bothering me on top of everything else. So I didn't have the best experience. I will say parts of Brie as a character I do love. I am super interested in the sequel despite a trope kind of looming over. Like, I've talked about this more specifically in a wrap-up that I did, but I'm not sure how much I want to say like specifics in this video, but there's kind of like this, one of my least favorite tropes in YA that's kind of just looming over the story, and I'm not looking forward to it. Not that, but I do want to see where we go with the story. I do want to see where Brie ends up as well. Now that she's gotten some answers, at least, I want to see where she moves on from there. And yeah, so I am interested in the sequel, but I was having a little bit of a hard time with this one. I am not gonna lie. So that was Legendborn, but I feel like it might just be like a trope thing and me not being in the mood for that kind of YA at the moment, like slower YA where we take our times and we focus a little bit more on feelings instead of action and like plot and stuff. Not that her feelings aren't a part of the plot. I'm not sure how I'm gonna explain this, but like inner monologue instead of like action, if that makes sense. So it might also have been a mood thing. I can't tell, but I just remember from like, let's say 20% until, or 10% until 70 or 75, I was getting frustrated. The rest, the ending is so good. Like, the ending is so good. I wish the rest of the book was kind of like the ending because it was so good. But, and that's also why I want to read the sequel, Bloodmarked, which I believe is out now. But I was having some issues going through this one, the first one, unfortunately, so. But on to the next book. We have an adult high fantasy, and that is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I read this like 8 years ago, by the way. So like, I'm a little bit nervous to talk about it because I remember the TV series so well. I think I watched, when was the series? When did it start? 2011 or something? Okay, yeah, I checked just to be sure. But series 1 came out in 2011, so I bought all the books that were out at the time in 2014 or 2013 possibly. Actually, it might have been 2013, so I read this in 2013 instead of 2014. It's 9 years ago. Jeez. It's almost a decade. Okay, so I'm a little bit nervous to talk about this because I remember the TV show so well, but as for the book content, which is not necessarily full on the same, rooted in the same, but details wise, not necessarily the same, it's been 9 years. I remember taking my time with this though, and having a lot of fun with it as well. So it is currently sitting at 4.44 on Goodreads. I don't know what it was before the TV series was out, but considering people were so excited when the TV series came out, I'm expecting, or I'm kind of assuming that it was a very popular book before the TV series started. So I read this, was confused because I was not a big fantasy reader back then, but I remember having a really good time and then being scared really scared off afterwards because I was like, did I really do that? Did I really read through the whole thing? And not really daring to start number 2. So I never got to read A Clash of Kings, but I kind of been feeling like doing a reread of these at the lately, so that might happen. But as someone who didn't read a lot of fantasy then, this was a mouthful. It took a long time to get through it, but I really enjoyed it. I didn't have a lot to compare it to at the time, which is also why I can't really say much on is this good, but I'm kind of thinking that it is. I need to reread it again now to like be able to compare to other books that I've read lately, but I'm kind of thinking that it is. Like, I wouldn't really know. I wanted to include it here though because I've never actually talked about A Game of Thrones on the channel. Like, I haven't done that. I can't believe I've read this when I used to. Like, I did so well halfway through the book and then I messed it up. Like, there's a wrinkle and then there's another one, but until halfway through the book I was doing so well, not wrinkling anything, and then it just messed up. Anyway, I don't know, should I reread Game of Thrones and then go from there? It's just, there's a lot of material in this series. And also, is it the last book or is it the two last books? I can't remember, but they're not out. Or it's not out, and is it ever going to be released? Like, I don't know, so I'm a little bit nervous about that as well. And as someone who didn't fully enjoy the ending of the TV series, that's kind of a turn off as well, but like the journey there, I kind of want to read and enjoy and experience, so I don't know. Let me know. Then we have another adult contemporary fantasy, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which I read very recently and I enjoyed so much. So we follow a caseworker. Is he a caseworker? Is that his name? He's a caseworker. He's a by-the-book caseworker. But he works for an organization that keeps track of orphanages that house magical children. So he's not just like a regular caseworker, he's dealing with magical children. He loves his job, he's good at it, he's very thorough, and he takes his time. He likes to take his time with all the children that he talks to, so he's very unbiased in that way. But his everyday is like very routine. It's very, we do this then, we do this now, this is how my day in, I have this for breakfast, I go to work, I go back to my house where my cat is, and that's where I live, and nothing really happens. So like, he has his job, but other than that, he's a little bit alone. He doesn't really have any hobbies per se, he just has his cat. So then one day the organization calls him up on the whatever floor because they want a very serious talk with him, and actually tells him to go to a special orphanage that they've been keeping an eye on, because the orphanage that he's been sent off or being sent off to is a little bit different from the others because it houses children that have very powerful powers. Some of them might even be so powerful that they could cause the end of the world. So he takes off, not really fully prepared because they're not giving him a lot of details. Shows up at the orphanage, is surprised by what he sees and what he learns while he's there, and then he starts to love being there. So when stuff starts to happen, our lead guy finds himself kind of like wanting to protect the orphanage and the children, and also the guy who leads the orphanage, who he might slowly be coming closer with as well. And that is The House in the Cerulean Sea. This is a vibes book. First and foremost, a vibes book. And it's like good vibes as well. So it's currently sitting at a 4.45. And I understand that. I think I gave this close to a 5 stars. I think it was just missing like a little bit for me to give it a full on 5. So I'm probably placing it at around 4.8 or something. I love this so much. I thought it was cute. I thought it was humorous in a very pleasant way, very natural way. The children are so charming. The love story is so charming. The different subjects that it touches on I think were handled well as well. But it's definitely first and foremost a vibes book. So if you're looking for like an action-packed plot, don't read this. This is like, you gotta be in the mood. Like you gotta, or maybe this will actually put you in the mood. In like a relaxed, kind of happy, kind of cozy kind of mood. You know what I mean? That's The House in the Cerulean Sea. It'll do that for you. I promise. Or I can't promise. Will almost promise. But it's very good. I love this. I thought it was great. And I was nervous going into it as well because I did not enjoy Under the Whispering Door as much as I hoped I would. So I was a little bit nervous, but definitely feel like it lived up to its rating. So yeah. Could definitely also see myself rereading that at some point. For the vibes. For the chill, relax vibes. Anyway, next book we have a contemporary but also historical fiction romance, and that is a little bit noisy. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I actually read this in a readathon alongside The House in the Cerulean Sea, so it's a little bit funny that they're both in this video, but was not planned. Did I enjoy both? Yes. Was it a good readathon? Most definitely was. And this is currently sitting at a 4.47. So we are nearing the 4.5. In this book, we follow a writer, a journalist, who works for a magazine that's very interested in doing an interview with Evelyn Hugo. So Evelyn Hugo is a Hollywood star. Like, she is mega famous. Also a recluse in our time. Like, she's been keeping to herself for a lot of years. Nobody's been able to do an interview with her. She's not really talking to anyone. She's not really coming out in public or anything. So they really want an interview with Evelyn because Evelyn has donated some dresses to an auction, I think it's called. An auction that's basically gonna donate the proceeds to charity. I think it's breast foundation, or not charity, breast foundation research. Breast cancer research. Words. Anyway, so they want to do a story with Evelyn because she's not really been talking to anyone. However, Evelyn is not doing interviews with people. But then, one day, Evelyn has actually sent them a message that she will do an interview with them, but only if they send this one specific journalist. Otherwise, she's not going to talk to them. So they have a choice. Like, they even tried to send someone else instead of sending this journalist, and Evelyn was like, nope. I want to talk to, what's her name? Rachel? Monique. Why do I keep wanting to call her Rachel? I did that the last time too. Okay. I want to talk to Monique. I'm not talking to anyone else. That's how it's gonna be. So Monique is sent off to Evelyn's home to talk to Evelyn, and when she gets there, it turns out that Evelyn doesn't actually want to do an interview. She wants to basically tell Monique her whole life story so that Monique can turn it into a biography instead. So Monique actually gets to write a full book on Evelyn. And Evelyn knows that if Monique does this, Monique is going to end up with so much money. And she's like, you can keep it all. I don't care, it's fine. But just promise that you sit down, listen to my story. And I can also assure you that once I've told you my whole story, you will hate me. And Monique is like, what? And that is basically The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I get why this has a high rating too. I enjoyed this so much. It's, I can't really tell if, I can't remember if I gave it a full on 5 stars or if I gave it like close to. I think I gave it a full on 5 stars because I was like into this, like I was just sucked into it. Like I could not think of anything else. I did not get sidetracked by anything else. I was just in this. I kind of forgot at the start a little bit that she's just a fictional character as well. I read the first little bit because you are told a couple of things about Evelyn before like the story starts. And I just remember thinking, if this was a real life person, I would want to read this biography. And then I realized I am going to read her biography because that is basically what this book is. But also think certain things that happen in the then, like we're not just hearing about things that are already out in the public. We're going to learn about her secrets as well, stuff that was never shown to the public or told to the public, and some things might be tied into the now as well, so it's not just like, let's go through the story. There's a bit of a twist to it as well, so I thought this was just so good. I like the writing, I like the world, I loved Evelyn as a character. Kind of hate her at the same time, but I think I love her more than I hate her, but I also love that I hate her. It's a complicated relationship. Yeah. Okay, anyway, this was really good. Can highly recommend. I still haven't fixed the tabs on it, so they're bothering me, but I'll get to it. My tea has gone cold. This means I've been talking for too long already. Next up, we have a book that, oh gosh, I am actually gonna have to tell myself to stop talking at some point when I start talking about this. It is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, which is an adult urban fantasy with romance and basically every single supernatural creature that you can think of. Almost. You can probably think of some like obscure supernatural creature that you've only come across like once. That's probably not going to be in this, but think like dragons and sprites and fae and vampires and witches and mermaids, mermen. There's a lot. There's a whole lot in this. But, oh gosh. The part of the reason why I love this book and this series so much, I can't really explain in this video. But, so Sarah J Maas, I know that it's kind of like either you love her or you hate her. I love her. Like, I love her writing. Somehow it just resonates with me so much. Like, it's just so pleasant to me. Yeah, I just vibe with it. So this is currently sitting at a 4.48, which I will say is probably one of like, we're talking about cult following as well with this one. Maybe even with Taylor Jenkins Reid a little bit as well. Some big authors. I mean, this is her debut. But like other than that, some big authors here. But I would say Sarah J Maas is definitely also one of those big authors that definitely has a following. I'm one of the following this time though. Call me basic, I don't care, it's fine. In this book though, we follow Bryce. And Bryce is a demi-fae. She's halfway living in Crescent City and is a bit of a party girl. There's a lot of things with Crescent City that are a little bit hard to explain. But if you have like supernatural blood of any kind, you can end up immortal. So her life right now is basically just partying day in and day out with her friends, having fun with people in the bathrooms of certain places and stuff. Like she's just kind of living her life the way that she wants and having fun. So she has some good friends. She has these 3 girls that she hangs out with all the time, but One of them is also a part of a werewolf pack, and she's close to several of the werewolves in this pack as well. They often hang out at Bryce's apartment and stuff. So one day while she's out with some of her friends, they're hanging out at her apartment, and when Bryce gets home from being out, something has happened in her apartment. Bryce is devastated. Like, this is her whole world basically falling apart because her friends mean everything to her. But whoever did this thing gets caught very quickly and put in jail. There's been some stuff with him before as well, so the police has already kind of had an eye on him. He's put in jail. However, a year later, murders start to pick up in the city, and Bryce is being dragged into this investigation because, as it turns out, it can't be the guy who's in jail because he's in jail. So the police is kind of at a loss, and to get some fresh eyes on the situation, they decide to pull in Bryce, but she also has to work with one of the police officer people who's not a person, he's an angel. His name is Hunt, and the two are kind of like not getting along super well, but at the same time kind of getting along a little bit. And that's basically what the first book is about. Sorting or figuring out what happened a year ago and what's happening now, but also following these two that I'm just gonna leave it there. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. But then there's a lot more to it than that. This was fun because it's I like the premise of Crescent City. I like the idea of Crescent City, but also this felt a bit like a murder mystery at times. Like, it just had kind of a mystery vibe to it. There was a lot of guessing involved while reading this. I will say this is an 800-page book. It's an adult. It's not like there's a crazy amount of letters on every page, but it's still an 800-page book. I read this in a day. Like, I could not stop myself. I could not. I read this in a day, and I read it in a day, like on a day after I'd done a 24-hour readathon without sleeping. So I was struggling, but I read it. I could not stop reading. I was so tired, exhausted, but I could not stop reading. I loved this so much. I love the sequel as well. I think this whole, it's very interesting. I'm not gonna say more than that. Oh, but no, I can't really say that either. This is a struggle. I just really want to emphasize that if you like fantasy romance, check out Sarah J. Maas's books. Like, don't be intimidated by people who don't like her books. Make up your own mind. If you start out with Throne of Glass though, just know that it's her first book and they get better. Because I'll admit, full on admit, Throne of Glass is not the best book, but the series as a whole, loved it. So that's all I'm gonna say. Yes. If you've read the books, you know why I'm kind of like, that's all I got for you, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle with this one because I really want everyone to know that these are amazing, but I can't tell you why. It sounds like a bad excuse. I promise there is a reason. We're gonna move on because I'm gonna dig myself into a hole and we're just gonna know. Okay, so next up we have, oh gosh, my babies. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which is currently sitting at a 4.49, and I will say part of the reason might be that this is kind of tied in with Shadow and Bone, the trilogy, which as far as I know became quite popular. And even though the characters that are in this book are not in Shadow and Bone, it is set in the same universe. You could read this and the sequel without having read Shadow and Bone though, but I would highly recommend that you read Shadow and Bone before going into this one. I'm not telling you why, but I mean, if any of you have watched I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now, but I'm still gonna say why. So this is young adult fantasy, and we follow I almost call him Kaz Brecker, who is a criminal mastermind. And also he has a friend who is a bit of an assassin. Her name is Inej. He works for, does he really work for people? Like, it's hard to explain. He gets contracts and then he does stuff. And he's like really good at this thing. He's really good at planning how to do crime. Like, that's his thing. He's just really good at it. He's also a bit of a badass, or very much a badass. So, but because he's so good at it, and due to stuff from his past, he also has some enemies. And one day he might be giving a chance to somehow negatively affect one of his enemies if he takes on this job. That's supposed to be completely impossible because he has to go to Fjerta, which is this place up north in this universe. And in Fjerta there is this this prison that is so well protected and impossible to break into, but what Cass has to do is break into it and free a prisoner who's there. And Cass is like, I'll do it. So with the help of Inej, he gathers a group. Oh, he also has a good friend called Jasper, by the way, who's like a master shooter thing. Yeah. They gather a group. The three of them, there's also Nina, who is, I don't want to call her a witch, but she can do some kind of magic. There's also a guy from Fjerta, whose name is Matthias. And then there's also, is he in the first book? I think he is. Wylan? It's just he's not in the first season of Shadow and Bone. So I think that's why I'm kind of like, he's there, right? But is he? Oh, right, he is. But there are no points of views, no chapters from him in this book. So, alright, because there are also 6. Should have just looked at the title. So the 6 of them take off to Fjerta to commit this impossible crime of freeing someone from a prison for some reason that they don't fully know. And it's amazing. I love this. Like, this is all, see, okay, not to like compare and stuff, but this is also, I think it's like 440 pages. It's 480. It's almost 500 pages, but this didn't feel like 500 pages. This was not info dumpy. It was just short chapters, action-packed. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. The chapters were cut off, so like, it always made you want to continue reading because they were just cut off at this like mean time, if you get what I mean. You know those books? This is one of those books, but you're gonna love it for it though. The best thing about this though is that it's found family. I'm just gonna say it's that it's found family and the characters are hilarious. Their chemistry with each other is so good. Each character has like their own thing. Their own personalities are very fleshed out, I feel, which is, it can get a little bit difficult with that many characters in one group and you're supposed to follow all of them. 5 points of views in this one, just want to repeat, but 5 points of view in this one. There are 6 in Crooked Kingdom, and I feel like it just works so well. I was not having any issue telling who's who at any point in this. I loved the twists as well. I loved that we didn't necessarily know what's going on in Cass's mind all the time, even though we do follow his point of view because he's not telling us. As a narrator, he's not telling us. So it kind of left you like, you're kind of left outside still somehow, but it just works so well. I love this book. I will recommend this all the time. I want to reread this. I just loved it so much. I feel like I've raved about it on the channel before, but like it was so good. And I will say, I think I might love Crooked Kingdom just a little bit more than Six of Crows, which says a lot because Six of Crows is like, yes. So if you haven't already, can highly recommend. Yes. So the third last book, and the third best book that I've read, according to Goodreads at least, actually really took me by surprise. And that is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. That said, it took me by surprise because I hadn't predicted that this was gonna have such high rating, even though I loved it. I think I rated it close to a 5 stars because I thought it was just really good, but it still surprised me. It's at 4.5. Like that's really good on Goodreads. That said though, we are also like, Brandon Sanderson is quite a popular, very big author. So we have a bit of the cult following trend or effect going on here as well. But this is young adult sci-fi, and in this book, this is actually reminding me that I really need to read Skyflight, what's it called? Starsight, Starflight, Cytonic, and Starsight? I can't remember. I can't even see them from here. It's really bothering me. Anyway, in this book, we follow Spensa, who is a young girl who just wants to be a pilot. Her father was a pilot when she was younger. Unfortunately, something happened during this thing, something went wrong, and he was basically branded a traitor after this thing happened. So for Spensa to become a pilot, it's a bit of a battle for her because she's also been branded as not necessarily as a traitor, but everyone knows that it's her father, so they're not letting her get close, if you know what I mean. However, Spensa lives on another planet where humans have gone to live, I suppose. And there's this thing going on at the planet or on the planet. There's a break in the sky, or for the lack of a better word, there's a break. So these aliens called Krell are constantly flying through, and so they need a lot of pilots to be able to fight back so the Krell aren't taken over. So because of this, Spensa finds her way into pilot school, but she's not having an easy time, and yes, but Spensa really wants to be a pilot. That's all she wants. She wants to be a pilot, not just for herself, but she also wants to be able to make her family proud and also just to save her family from all this harassment that they go through after what happened to her father. So that is what this book is about, and I love this so much. Like, I really, really adore Spensa as a character. I love female characters that just kind of know what they want and they go for it. If people don't treat them well, they don't let it, but they let it affect them, but they don't necessarily let it beat them. They keep their chin up and they do what they gotta do to stay focused on this thing, you know? Spensa is definitely one of those characters. Like, she will do anything to get to this place she wants to be. Like, she will do anything to get to be a pilot. So as a character, I loved her so much. I found it very interesting. Like, this feels like a good example of how information should be, at least to my personal preference, this feels like a good example for me on how information should be relayed to the reader. Because there's a lot of information that you gotta learn. It's a sci-fi, so like, the world is vastly different from ours. Like, their day-to-day is totally different, how they live is totally different, and also there's so much information about ships, or not like ship, but airships, spaceships, things you can fly in. Not planes, but like spaceships. Let's just call them spaceships. There's a lot of information about that, and at no point did it feel info-dumpy to me. In fact, I feel like it was written in a way that really made me interested in whatever was going on. I say whatever was going on because I just don't want to spoil anything for you, but there are also, can I show this one? Yes, I can. There are drawings of like maneuvers and stuff that they do with the ships. But that said, you also have to find it interesting to actually get something out of it. If spaceships are not your thing and like flight maneuvers and, you know, that sort of stuff, it's not your thing. You're not gonna like this because there's a lot of it. But I think for me, it was written in a way that I was just sucked into it. It wasn't boring me at any point. I didn't get frustrated with the information at any point. I just was sucked into it. I just really, really enjoyed every part of this. My biggest selling point of this, or like, selling point, it sounds like I'm trying to sell you a book. I guess I am trying to convince you to read it, but the best part of the book for me though was Spensa. There is also another character that I thought was a really funny addition to it, but I can't actually tell you what the character, or like who the character is, because you don't get introduced to them until a little bit into the book. But I thought that was just like out of the blue, and I really enjoyed that part of it. So I need to read the sequels because this is getting dumb. Why haven't I read them yet? These are like some of the books where I've read the first one and enjoyed it so much, and then I've just kept on pushing the next ones because I enjoyed the first one so much. It's kind of like a mix of what if I don't like the sequels, but also what if I read the sequels and then just get hit by like tons of bad books after. Like, they're my backups for when I've read really like a lot of bad books. But in general, I never really read bad books. I don't come across a lot of bad books per se. So there's not been a reason to read them yet. Like a reason like that. I gotta tell myself that it's fine. Like, I want to read them. I want to see what happens to Spensa and what happened at the end of this, because there's stuff going down like a lot. It was a lot, okay? It was a lot. And so we are at the last two, not two. The last two I don't have as physical books though. So the first one is, or number 2 is Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, which is a newer book. And Colleen Hoover again also has a bit of a cult following, or definitely has a cult following. But this is an adult contemporary romance, but not a rom-com, definitely a bit more like serious vibes, and yes. So I read this close to reading Ugly Love, I think, which is gonna cause some issues because I might be mixing the two up just a little bit. But it's currently sitting at a 4.51, which is so high, and I did not see, like, this one really surprised me because it's I think it's because it's newer Colleen Hoover that it's that high. Like, it's mainly her following that has read it so far. I read it because someone told me to for a video, so that's why I've read it. Because I remember seeing the synopsis and thinking, oh, I'll just wait a little bit with this one. I'll get to it at some point. But then I think it was one of the 12 books that I needed to read for 2022. 12 books told I should read by you. So I read it. It's not my favorite one of her books. I also have this feel like I have this weird thing with Colleen Hoover that in the moment I'm like, I love the books because they just make me feel things, but then afterwards I'm like, was it really that good? Like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. But in this book, we follow a mother who has just come out of jail after she has been there for a while. I can't remember how long exactly, maybe like 7 years or so. So it's been a while. She gave birth to her daughter while in prison and then hasn't really seen her daughter for the remainder of her stay in prison. So she's gone back to the town that she grew up in because she knows that's where her daughter is and she wants a second chance at basically being her mother. But certain things about this whole why is she in jail might be causing some issues with her wanting to get reacquainted with her daughter, and her only way to get back with her daughter basically is by getting help from this guy that she meets at a bar. I think he's the bar owner, and there's some things going on with him as well, and I can't really I don't want to say exactly what. Well, do I? No, I don't think I do. He's basically like her way in, but at the same time, like, it's really hard for them to also see each other. I'm doing a horrible job at summarizing this. But essentially he's just like the last remaining link to her daughter. So yeah, but there's some stuff going on that's making it hard for them to also get close to each other. And he has some like, what do I do in this situation? Like, he has some questions and some issues with this whole thing as well. That's all I'm gonna say. I feel like that's the best I can do because I really don't. There are certain things about this that I don't want to spoil because when I learned while reading, I was like, well, okay, that surprised me. And I want you guys to also be surprised, so I'm not just gonna like lay it out on paper for you. That said, I don't think this is one of the best Colleen Hoover books that I've read. And to add on to that, like, I did have to check up the synopsis because I think I read it at the same time as I read Ugly Love, and there are certain things that are kind of that kind of remind me of it, like, yeah. So I was mixing the two up a little bit in my head, and I think that might have influenced my opinion on the book as well because it got all confusing to me. That said, yes, it is heartbreaking. If you like Colleen Hoover's writing, you are going to vibe with it, but if you don't, I think this is another one of those, like, either you like her or you don't. But I am, like, fully honestly having some issues talking about reminders of him because I can't fully remember everything I felt, everything I thought while reading the book, because I'm also mixing it up with Ugly Love. But I will say, I don't think it's a full-on 5.5 or 5.51. Is that what it was at? I think it's closer to a 4.2 maybe, because I don't think it's one of her best books. It was touching though. It was definitely an emotional read. So if you have vibed with Colleen Hoover's books before, you will definitely also get something out of it. But I think that's all I'm gonna say on this one, which wasn't a lot. But again, I don't know. It was a terrible thing to read the two around the same time because I just have been mixing them up in my head ever since, and that is annoying. And probably also says something about those two books, doesn't it? Yeah, anyway. So that was number 2 on the list. The last one, and I will sing the praises for this one, is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, Volume 1, which is currently sitting at a 4.53. I will also say, like, this is insanely high. I think this series has gotten a lot of stans while it's been out, especially also now that there is a Netflix show, which I think has been renewed for at least 1 or 2 seasons as well recently, so I'm super excited for that because I loved it. I thought it was so cute. It's not written for me. It's not written for my age group either. I am way past the coming of age part of my life, to put it bluntly. Like, we're way past that. Sail a ship that sailed. It was that way around. But we're way past it. I loved this though. I thought it was so cute. Like, I think you could read this regardless of what age you are, because even if it's not written for you or if it's not about you, you will still learn some things from it. It has a good message. It's all good vibes, but at the same time also sad and heartbreaking. Well, not this is heartbreaking. Okay. It is sad though. Parts of it is sad. It's very touching, but it's also just like happy feels and vibes and just cuteness, and I forgot what to tell what this is about. But anyway, just a little bit of a late summary. We follow Charlie and also Nick and Charlie has been basically outed at his school. He's gay. He's been dealing with that. People have kind of like moved on a little bit from it, but he still feels it now and then. And then he meets Nick, who is a jock. And the two become friends, and then, you know, one thing leads to another, and there might be a little bit more than friends, and it's just really cute seeing how they get to that, and also Nick kind of coming to terms with some things about himself. Charlie also working with or dealing with various things, not so much in the first one, well, apart from like being outed, which you could argue is a pretty big thing, but there's also some things in the later volumes as well that he deals with. So I will say though, the main part of the first one is the coming out for Nick, and just like everyone reacting to that and how it's handled and stuff, and it's just so, I just love it. So I just love it because it's so cute and it's so feel good, but also like touches on some important subjects, and like I said, you can learn a lot from it as well. I think it has some good messages in it that I think everyone, I kind of have to repeat myself, could learn something from, because it's just, there's some wise words in there, so something that the stans themselves could honestly learn from these days, because what the heck. I don't want to get into Twitter or just like, people suck sometimes, like, ugh. I just really loved Heartstopper, and I've, yes, enjoyed it so much. Definitely will be supporting this series. I think it's very important to some people as well. So yeah, highly recommend. Like regardless of who you are, your age group, just highly recommend reading through it because you will be able to learn a few things from it. So, but that is that's number one. Does it deserve a spot as number one? Actually, yeah, I do think so. The whole series, I think so. So it's not, yeah, I don't have a physical copy of it. I really need a physical copy of it. So anyway, I have it on Kindle. I really need a physical copy of it anyway. But those are the top 10 top rated books that I've read according to Goodreads. I need to work on that title, definitely. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of the books, share your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear your opinions. And yeah, like I mentioned, if you want to check out any of the synopses written down, you want to understand them a little bit better, because I do tend to mumble. I do have another accent than a lot of other people. You can find links to the books in the description box down below. But that is all I got for you guys today, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to hit the thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, but also bookish unboxings, readathons, TBR videos, wrap-ups, and you know, all the booktube stuff, definitely consider hitting the subscribe button. But that is all I got for you guys today, so I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye! Oh, you know, you're beautiful.